Alright guys, so we're going to be doing this beef pho, and so whenever I make mine, I actually buy whatever comes in. I try to buy the smallest package at the grocery store. So what I get is these are beef neck ribs. It comes with the bone, a little bit of meat, and then I get the beef short ribs and a small piece of flank, and this is a chuck roast. And actually what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to split everything in half and vacuum seal half of it so that next time I have a package ready to go, package of meat ready to go, and I'm only going to use half of it for this recipe. I really don't know what the weight of all of this is, but like I said, I usually use two beef short ribs, half of this flank steak, half of whatever this package of bones are, and then half of this small chunk of chuck roast, and that's it. Alright, so what I'm doing here is I'm just bringing some water up to boil, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up the meat in here for a little bit just to get the impurities out, and then I'm going to skim some off and then pull out the meat and put it in the Instant Pot from there so that we have a clean, clear broth at the end. Alright, so now now that this water is boiling, we're gonna just drop everything in the hot water so we can get all the impurities out of it. Here's all the chuck roast. This is the skirt steak or fajita meat. Here's the short ribs and neck bones. So we're gonna let this cook for about 15 to 18 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, and all the impurities are gonna start floating to the top. And what I'm gonna do is just filter that out, and then we're gonna still use this broth to start our pho. And I'll be cooking this pho in an Instant Pot for an hour and 30 minutes. I may push it to 2 hours, but we'll see. We'll see how the meat looks whenever I pull this out. Alright guys, for the broth, what we're going to be doing for the spices is going to be 1 tablespoon of coriander seed, 1 tablespoon of salt, 1 tablespoon of pepper, 2 tablespoons of rock sugar or brown sugar, and this is supposed to be about 10 star anise seeds and 4 bay leaves. To the broth, I'm going to be adding probably all the ginger except for this. I'm sorry, I'm going to use all of this ginger with the exception of probably this. I may just use the whole thing because there's no point in keeping that small chunk around. What I'm going to do with this garlic, I'm just going to cut it in half and put it into the pot. I'm going to quarter this onion, and then also to the broth, I'm just going to cut off the stems and use that in my broth. I'm going to use 7 tablespoons of this fish sauce, and then we can adjust accordingly after it's cooked. Alright, so this water has been kind of slowly boiling away, and as you can see, all the scum has come up to the top, or the impurities have come into the top. So what I'm going to do is skim this off, or just fish out the, actually what I'm going to do is just fish out the meat, put it in a bowl here, and when I'm going to dump this water into the Instant Pot, but when I dump it in, I'm going to skim this water to keep these impurities from going into the broth, because again, we want a clear, clean broth for our pho. We don't want to see particles like this floating around. Alright, real quick before I put the seasoning into the stock or into the pot, we're just going to lightly cook these just so we can kind of open up the oils inside the spices. The only thing I'm not going to put in there is my sugar because I don't want it to melt. And you don't want to cook it, you don't want to burn it, you just want to start, once you can start smelling it, then that means they're done. Alright, so the spices have become aromatic. So I'm just going to go ahead and pull them off this. Now what I'm going to do is brown the meat, brown the quartered onion, the garlic, the ginger, just to kind of bring out another dimension of flavor. So let me put this in the Instant Pot, and I'll be right back with the vegetables. Alright, so here's the onion. It's a quartered onion. Forgot to take off the paper. There we go. Garlic. And ginger. We're just going to brown these up real quick, and then we're going to put them in the Instant Pot. Alright, so I browned them up a little bit, not as much as I wanted to. Normally I would use my cast iron to add some sear to this stuff, but since I already used it for the spices, I just went ahead and used it for these vegetables. Alright guys, so I'm not sure if I mentioned before, but this is an 8-quart Instant Pot. So what I already did is I've added all the spices to it. I currently have it on saute mode because I'm going to be adding the beef and the vegetables and then the stock. So let's start with the beef. So the reason why I start with the beef first, I just want to make sure I get the important stuff in first. And what I'm going to do is just fill it with broth up to the maximum level, so that we have the most amount of beef in there and not too worried about the amount of broth. So another thing you can do is actually brown the meat instead of just putting it in here like this after it's been boiled. Again, it just adds another dimension of flavor, but this is the way I prefer to do it. So again, we're going to add in our cilantro bunch, our 7 tablespoons of fish sauce, our vegetables, I'm gonna add in this strainer. I'm gonna add a napkin to it just to further strain it. And here we go with the hot broth. So the reason why I set it on saute mode is because it gets this pot nice and hot, or it keeps it hot, because the Instant Pot is notorious for getting hot. But because we added the hot broth, we have it on saute mode, everything should be pretty hot, so it should get up to temperature pretty quick. So it's set to seal. Now I'm going to change it to meat or stew, and I'm going to add it for 90 minutes, which is an hour and a half. Alright, so now that we've done that, again, I had it on saute mode, I turned it off. Now we're going to set it to stew, and we're going to do 90 minutes. Alright, for the toppings, it's just going to be cilantro, I'll probably end up just using this half onion. I'll quarter or cut this lime into lime wedges, and then some bamboo shoots that I bought from the store from over here, if you can see that. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, again, just kind of rough chop the cilantro. So I'm going to stop here because I don't want to get these stems in there. I can pick that later if I need it. I think this will be sufficient. So again, I'm just going to rough chop it again. And we like our cilantro pretty much at this stage. We don't like it much finer than this. So that's done. And then lemons. So a secret or a little quick tip with lemons, limes, or most citrus, to get the juiciest citrus, always make sure that your lime is smooth. The smoother it is, the juicier it's going to be. If it's has a bunch of dimples in it or a bunch of texture on it, it's not going to be as juicy. So quick tip. You always want to cut off the stem sides because that's where the everything's been rinsed off, but you always want to cut off the stems because that's where most of the germs are harbored at. So cut it in half. I usually, for drinks, I'll cut it another half, but for this, I'll leave it there. And you always want to cut in half, flat side down, so it doesn't roll on you, and then cut. I've seen people actually try to cut it like this, but it can be rolling either way, so it's just another safety tip. Alright, and then for the onion, that doesn't look very good there. So we'll see what we can do about that. Actually, what I'll just use is this half of this quarter. And you always want to leave the stem on, just so it doesn't fall apart on you. As soon as you cut that off, this whole thing is going to start falling apart. So we want it this side of it. I think that will be enough for us. We actually don't use that much onion in our actual dish that we eat. So that's basically it. Now we wait for an hour and 30 minutes and we can have our pho. Hey guys, I totally failed you. I forgot to add a cinnamon stick. I was actually cleaning up and I was going to prep the toppings, the cilantro and the onions, and I was cleaning up and I saw this thing of cinnamon sticks and I'm like, oh, totally forgot. So I've actually released the pressure already and I'm just going to throw in one cinnamon stick. There we go. In. Alright, we're good now. Alright guys, so it's been past its time by 13 minutes, so that's why it says low 13. I'm going to release the pressure and we'll filter out all the ingredients out of there first. We'll fish them out and put them in that stock pot that I cooked the meat in, and strain again the broth again because we have all those spices kind of floating around, so we don't want that in our actual meal. And then I actually have a small pot of hot water boiling so that we can do our instant vermicelli, and then we'll put the dish together and it'll be time to eat. So now that the time has finished on our cooking, it's time to release the pressure. Some people have Instant Pots and they're scared to use it because, you know, of the old pressure cookers. These are so safe that other than maybe burning yourself, it's probably the highest risk. Of course, you don't want to open it with all that pressure. So usually what I do, because there is a lot of liquid in here, usually what I do, or actually anytime I cook anything in this Instant Pot, I always put a towel over this this venting where the steam is going to be shooting out, just because I don't want any liquid or food particles up in my ceiling or anywhere in the surrounding area. So usually what I do is I put it on and then I let it pressure like that, and it kind of dissipates. Some liquid will kind of form around here, but I'd rather have that than it spraying all over my ceiling. So that beep you just heard, I just turned off the Instant Pot, and we'll let the steam come out, and then I'll come back after all the pressure has been released. Alright guys, so the pressure has been released. The towel's somewhat wet. It's gonna smell delicious like pho. So I'm gonna open this up. So the other thing is you want to make sure this red pressure valve has dropped down, and can you see it here? It's dropped down, so it's safe to open. So we'll put it back on venting, and this model doesn't have a little holder here, so I always have to set it down. Again, I'm just going to fish through here for the meat, put it back in this pot, and then once I get all the meat out, I'm going to strain the juice, the broth from here using the strainer, so that again, we don't have this coriander floating in our broth. Now I do want to point out, if you can see how clear this broth is. I'm telling you, this recipe is so good, I'd put it up against any Vietnamese restaurant in the area. When we had this, we knew this was going to be a keeper, and we were going to perfect it. The first time I made it, I didn't use the cilantro inside the broth. I figured that's just something I could add to it going forward. And when it comes to recipes, I always do it the way the recipe says, and then every time after that, I always add something different to it. But anyway, like I said, I'm going to filter out all the meat, or fish out all the meat, fish out all the big particles, strain the broth into this pot, and I'll be back after I've done that. Alright guys, so I fished out all the meat. I've tried to filter out as much. There are some cilantro and a little bit of onion, and I don't mind onion being in here. It's just more of the star anise and, you know, the cinnamon stick and the coriander. I don't want that stuff being in the broth. The last time I did it, I didn't strain it, and I kind of regretted it later. So now like I said, I'm going to grab this pot. It is a little warm. I'll probably get a towel to hold it, but I'm going to strain it in here now, and I'm going to use this towel here. Looks like there's a little piece of fat there or something. I don't like the looks of it. It is fat. Take that out. Take that out. All right, so it's pretty much cleaned up. Now, like I said, I have some hot water boiling away. I'm gonna do the instant noodles, or the vermicelli, and then it'll be ready to plate up. Alright guys, so I'm using these noodles. I'm not sure if they're available everywhere. I would think they are. They're just instant noodles, the very fine noodles. That's the ones my family likes. So we're going to cook these up. They only take about 3 seconds to cook in this hot water. As you can see, they're pretty much already getting soft. What I like about these noodles are already in like a serving amount, so that's one serving. Alright, noodles are done. Actually, we'll give them another 30 seconds. All right, so we're gonna plate this up. First, let's start off with the beef. We'll throw in one big neck bone. Again, the bones just provide flavor. We'll clean that off. Probably should have gone for 2 hours just to make it even more tender. But you can see how clean the meat comes off the bones. So now that we got the protein in there, we got the noodles in there, let's add our toppings. Let's add a little bit of cilantro, a little bit of onions, some bean sprouts, lime wedge, sriracha, and some of this delicious broth. Just want you to see how clear this is. All right, so there you go. Pho, beef pho, hour and a half. Normally, and you know what's so special about this recipe using the Instant Pot? Normally this would be a 7-hour, 8-hour dish just because it takes that much time to break down the meat, especially these tough cuts of meat. And like I said, the flavors, it's just amazing. It's clear broth. This is the most amazing broth I've ever had.